And that is what is key to gaining the hope back. Honestly, it isn't being able to do those things that you didn't get to do, or your disease going away, or your trauma healed. It's not about that.
Right.
It is about being able to validate yourself for what you have gone through or what you're going through.
Welcome to the Serve, Love, Lift podcast. I'm Tiffany Garvin. Years ago on a quiet beach in Hawaii, I felt the weight of the pain and struggles we all face in this world and how much we need each other. Soon after, this movement was born to serve, love, and lift. I believe that we are meant to serve the world with our unique gifts, love ourselves and others, and lift each other up to live with joy. This podcast is here to help you heal your heart and your life and empower you on your path to becoming the best version of yourself. I invite you to listen carefully and jot down notes that come to mind, whether they come from me or from your own heart. Then, share this episode with 3 people who you feel could use it today. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get going. On today's episode, I have the privilege of speaking with Audrey Marie, author of the upcoming book, Chronically Unstoppable: How My Life Went from Fight or Flight to Free. As a teenager, she experienced a surgery gone wrong that left her bedbound with debilitating pain, compounding traumas, and struggling with her mental health. A few years later, she finally received the help she needed, along with a few profound lessons that have inspired her to help others. Her message is that living with pain is possible, and as we learn to take back control of our lives, the pain will take a back seat. She has a huge heart and is my new hero. Audrey, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
I was so inspired when I heard about your story from a common friend of ours that I was excited to have you on the podcast, as this season we're talking about trauma survivors. And you are a survivor if I ever heard of one. I'm so grateful, willing to share your story and the profound insights and inspiring messages that you've learned along the way.
Of course. No, thank you for the platform. It's big for me to speak on things like this when you go through it.
Right, because there's so much trauma in the world and we need hope.
Oh, absolutely. And people struggle to understand when it's any type of invisible condition or anything, and people struggle to understand that. So that's kind of my mission, is to help people understand it.
I love that, because the world at large that doesn't really understand, even though we're all traumatized to some degree or another and all walking wounded.
Right.
But when we don't really understand, the implications in our mental and emotional well-being can be really dramatic and really profound, even with smaller traumas. But today we're going to dive in a little bit to your journey, where you had some pretty significant traumas.
I did, yeah, and I had them pretty young too, right in the growing years, for sure.
Yeah, that's crazy. So what would you like to share about your story?
Yeah, so when I was about 16, I had developed a cyst under one of my armpits. A cyst is just those bulges that come under your armpit. Maybe you might think they're originally acne or things like that, but they're not. They're called cysts. And what happened was, as I was kind of thriving in my high school world of doing theater and making a ton of friends, I mean, it was the best year of my life. I got into a musical called Into the Woods. I'm sure musical theater people who are watching this know exactly what I'm talking about. But the costume actually ended up causing me to sweat quite a bit. Yeah. So you combine the theater lights with the costume, and it's kind of this recipe for a disaster for somebody who might get more cysts. So what happened was the cyst actually opened up. And so it was kind of this chronic wound that was continuously impacting my life more than I thought anything could impact my life. I was trying to avoid sweating. There were certain things that I was trying just to get the pain to stop. I went into a surgeon and he said, yeah, we can take that right out. And then the day before surgery, I got another cyst in my left armpit. And this was a sign that I had something called hidradenitis suppurativa, so HS for short, which is where you just get chronic cysts that can be in different places in your body. So pretty painful, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
I went in for the surgery and he did surgery under both of my armpits. The biggest difficulty is that when you have surgery under your armpits, a lot of the time the surgeons can't close those up. They can't stitch them, they can't staple them. Sometimes in rare cases they can figure it out, but most of the time they have to stay open.
Wow.
And that was kind of when my journey of trauma began, because the way, without getting too graphic, just because I want to be thoughtful of kind of what we're talking about here, but you have to pack those wounds, which means the packing has to come out. A lot of surgeons will do it at the hospital. Unfortunately, mine said that I could do it at home, so my mom had to do it the day after surgery. So that is when I experienced dissociation for the first time. I tend to kind of call it checking out. That's my go-to word. And I checked out that day and I let my mom do what she needed to do. And I think this is important to remember, right? Our caregivers, our parents, our friends, all of these people, they are also experiencing trauma. You might be the main piece of the trauma. Sure, I experienced it the most. I don't even like comparing, but the most where I could feel it. But my mom experienced serious trauma that day. My siblings who heard me yelling experienced trauma that day. So I think that that's something important to remember. And that's something I talk about in my book, is this idea that we must consider the people around us who were there when we experienced the trauma.
So secondary trauma, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's something that definitely I've grown to realize throughout my journey more and more, the amount of people that are impacted. And it's not, as much as it feels like it's you alone, it's not just you. Yeah. So then after I got that surgery, the wound had been open for a year. The surgeon never closed it. You might call it malpractice. I'm not going to go too deep into that, but he was aware it was open and he didn't do anything to close it. So what that did was that was constant experiencing of trauma and re-experiencing. I would be in the bathrooms at school rebandaging before I went to theater, or, getting sick in the morning before I went out to go talk to my friends because of this pain that I had.
Wow.
Yeah, so I had the second surgery to close it because I had a different surgeon. And within 2 to 3 weeks after that surgery, I began feeling a pain that I can't quite describe. It was odd. It started right localized. I thought that it was just that was just a local surgical pain, but it spread. And within a week, I was struggling to write. I was tremoring. I couldn't sleep. That was a different type of trauma. And yet I was feeling stuck in my body and there was no way out. I couldn't, it was this trapped feeling.
And that amplifies whatever trauma you're experiencing, that feeling of being trapped too, right?
Exactly. And that's something too that, this level of pain was based out of experiencing long-term pain for over a year. Although I got surgery to fix it, my brain was still stuck in that cycle. I went to get a ton of different tests. I mean, if you've had a EMG, you know how difficult those can be. MRI, all of the tests you can think of to rule anything out.
You start feeling like a pincushion, don't you?
Yeah.
Poking and prodding and and pushing into the, yeah, I can
Exactly.
totally relate to that. It's miserable.
I used to always say I feel like an animal in the zoo
Oh
is what
yeah.
I used to say, or a test dummy. It was, my case was fascinating to doctors,
Oh wow.
but it wasn't fascinating to me. This was my life.
Right.
And although doctors are constantly evolving and learning, I think that that's important for them to remember, right? We're, as much as they're fascinated, this is our life. So when you look at us like we are fascinating, we might take that as we're weird, or
Right.
we're abnormal. Nobody at any age, let alone 17, wants to feel that way, right? So that mindset started to just take hold in my brain, and I would be lying if I said it wasn't still here to this day. It's a very tricky mindset, and it only got worse when the neurologist sat me down and she said, "We found nothing, so we are going to diagnose you with a condition called complex regional pain syndrome, CRPS."
The worst pain known to man, right?
It is called the worst. Yes, it is. It is called the worst pain known to man. There is a specific pain scale, and it is ranked higher than childbirth and amputation. I oftentimes get questions of people interested into, what does it feel like, right? When you have that level of pain, what does it feel like? I oftentimes will say, think of that deepest bone pain you could possibly think of, constant, and then on top of it, think of the worst sunburn you've ever gotten in your life, and then multiply that by 1,000,000,000.
Wow.
So you're having this deep pain, but you're also having this surface level pain. And then on top of all of it, it makes you sensitive to the touch. So it hurts when people touch you. So it's very isolating. And yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to even explain, because I have never had any other pain that's been even close to it. And after the diagnosis, I mean, it slowly ripped my life away.
Wow.
Yeah, my faith in life and friends, and overall faith too.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think this is something really important for people to understand that have never experienced any kind of chronic pain, because it's one thing when you can have a headache and it goes away in a little while, or you do get an injury and after a few days it's fine, or smaller injuries that are gone in a few minutes. When you have something that goes on for days, weeks, months, and years, it changes how you perceive the world. It changes how you perceive yourself. It changes how you perceive reality. And it is a deep, disconcerting, discombobulating thing that then bleeds into every other aspect of your life. That's what it was for me. And the anxiety and depression and all of the other aspects of your mental and emotional well-being start getting short-circuited as well. Is that kind of what you experienced too?
I mean, completely. Yeah, I think us as humans, we really struggle with this idea of forever. So when you're told that your pain may, right? We're never saying 100%. I refuse to believe that.
Yeah.
But when we're told that it may never go away,
Yep.
the idea of forever, we just simply can't grasp. I think that is what causes all of those anxiety and mental health concerns and isolation, because we're trying to understand that idea of, right, we're not going to take Advil and have it go away. We're not going to go to sleep and have it go away. And so I think with that idea of forever, we begin to try to understand, how do we live with the idea? And that's when we kind of develop this idea of planning, right? So if I were to go out with friends, I'm making the assumption that I'm going to have a tougher time that night.
Right.
And that's totally valid, to try to plan and figure out how to get this pain under control. But I wholeheartedly believe, and this is kind of explained more in my book, but I believe that that's one of the most dangerous things you can do, because there is no way of knowing. unfortunately. It's a hard thing to understand, but when we are living by the pain instead of working alongside or with the pain,
Right.
and when we're just fighting the pain constantly,
Yeah.
that is exhausting.
Yes, it is.
Mentally, physically, all of those things. I mean, it's exhausting. So when you learn to work alongside or with the pain, yes, there is a chance that you have a higher pain that night.
Mm.
But what about the one single night that you just don't? That is the one single night you need to hold on to. And that's something that I quickly learned when I went through my treatment.
I love that. And your whole message about learning to live with this pain, it doesn't have to control your life. You can still live. You can find ways to mitigate the pain, to trick your mind into thinking that it's a different experience than
Right.
what it is, right? And I remember that my dad told me in the recent years after I had healed, he said, it was amazing to watch you when you had something exciting to look forward to. When you had a project, when you
Yes.
had something meaningful coming up, you had more energy, you could move around more, you could do more, your eyes were bright again. I was a different person. I was more of myself for those
Right.
stretches of days. Did you experience that?
Oh, like 100%. I used to tell my mom all the time that I just need something exciting for the next day. I need a reason, right?
Yes,
A reason to
yes,
get out of bed. I need a
purpose.
reason. That's something that when I went into treatment, I remember my pain therapist, we sat down for the first appointment, right? And a lot of us with trauma might not trust therapists to begin with, right? Because maybe we had a bad experience, maybe we don't want to be analyzed. We're
Yeah,
protecting our own self, right? I
that's
mean,
right.
that's a pretty common thing.
Yeah.
And she sat me down and I was explaining things to her and she just paused and she said, "What if this doesn't go away?" And I had realized that I had spent 5, 6 years waiting
Mm,
and waiting. I had plans for when I was, quote, better.
yeah.
I had a list of things I would do when I was better, but I didn't know when better would be. So I sat for years and years just waiting for it to happen. And so when she told me that, I have to be honest, when she told me that, I was furious.
Yeah.
How dare she say that it might not get better? And halfway through treatment, when I was kind of in that mode of giving up,
Mm,
I was starting to put up the walls because they were getting too close,
yeah.
right? We don't want people to see all of the pain we have because it's hard for us to take, let alone our loved ones, right? And I was in that place of giving up. And I remember walking into her and I sat down and I said, I think I'm done here. I can't keep doing this. She looked at me and she told me to get out a piece of paper and draw future Audrey. And it was odd to me because it felt like those things you have to do in school, kind of picturing you. But it wasn't the fact of picture where I would be or what I would be doing, right? Any of us can do that at any point. It would be beneficial, but who knows? It was more of the fact of when I was drawing her, I didn't even realize she was wearing a bracelet that I could no longer clasp because of my condition.
Mm,
She had shoes with shoelaces that I could no longer tie. And those are the things we focused on. I wanted to be able to clasp that bracelet.
right.
So forget what I wanted job wise or
Right.
location. Those are the things that are key. And those are the things that we can potentially take back, right?
Mm, yeah. Just the survival, just the day-to-day things that we take for granted when we don't have that constant pain or that fatigue or whatever is going on. Being able to just live any kind of semblance of normality, and to have that threatened is devastating. How did you
Right.
hold on to hope once you really realized this this might not go away. And you got over, maybe through a grief process, maybe you went through the stages
Right.
of grief,
You
right?
do.
And
Yes.
then
Yeah.
how did you come back to hope and to keep pushing through? Because I know it was hard for me at times. And there were nights where I just prayed, okay, just, I don't want to wake up. It's too
Right.
much.
Right.
And then I would get those little whisperings that said, hang on, there's something for you to do.
Wow.
What got you through?
That's such a great question because I do feel like our trauma and our pain rips that hope away in a very slow manner.
Mhm.
Um, and I remember the moment when I realized I didn't have it anymore. There was no hope left. At that point in my life, I full-heartedly believed in the quote that hope breeds eternal misery.
Oh, wow.
And, it was a joke, but it wasn't a joke to me. I believed that. So after we drew future Audrey, I remember going back to my hotel and just crying. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I just cried. And not because I was sad about realizing I couldn't be her. I cried because future Audrey, in my mind, she was valid.
Mm,
She went through things that so many people, doctors, who knows, denied or played down.
right.
But future Audrey was standing in this level of pride that she knew what she went through was hard, as opposed to what she went through. Yeah, everybody goes through things. And that is what is key to gaining the hope back. Honestly, it isn't being able to do those things that you didn't get to do, or your disease going away, or your trauma healed. It's not about that.
Right.
It is about being able to validate yourself for what you have gone through or what you're going through.
Wow.
And a lot of the time we need people on the outside to do it for us at first, right?
Definitely.
A lot of people with especially CRPS, many people don't believe them. Even their parents, their family, they don't believe them. And when I went into treatment, I had a team around me that no matter what I was doing, they believed me and they believed in me. Eventually, I realized I internalized that. And I think that's something cool about writing this book is that I'm writing it and I write chapters about my trauma and I write about lessons I've learned. And I realize, oh, hey, I went through a lot of stuff and I'm sitting here writing about it. So I think that's what's so important about the hope is
Yes.
this idea that you hope you become even the better version of you after everything that you've been through. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Because there's something inside of you that says that that's still real. That says, I know I'm more than this. I know I'm more than my struggles and my weaknesses and my pain and misery. There is more in me and still left of me than this trauma. Because as I've been studying trauma for so long, there's some of these key pieces where we recognize I'm still in there. The
Right.
trauma didn't kill me.
Exactly.
The trauma didn't steal my identity. It's still in there. I'm still in there. And as we peel back those layers of, right, an onion,
Right.
often referred to, right, peeling back the
Right.
layers of onions to heal, it's getting closer to the real us again. Our gifts and our talents and our beauty and our hope and our love and all of the yummy things that are who we are, that are who you are, Audrey, all of those
Right.
beautiful things you had that connection to still, and you knew, I'm still me, I'm still in here, so there is hope.
Right. And I think that's the most important thing about pushing the pain or the trauma to the back seat, right? When it's in the driver's seat, that is what drives your life.
Yeah.
We don't need to give it that level of power. It will take everything it can possibly take. I mean, you let it go, it'll take everything, right? The second that gets pushed into the back seat, now you determine where you're going with your life.
Yeah.
I had a realization when I was at an event with my family, and I realized that everybody who came up to us, it was, Audrey, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Are you getting back to things? It was all of these questions revolved around how am I? As opposed to what are you working on right now?
Yeah.
Or what are you doing? And it was a moment of, is this what I've become? Am I no longer who I am? And now I'm just a front facing CRPS in my trauma.
Wow.
And so that is something that will shift as long as you are putting things to the back seat, but they can't get there unless we address them. Right.
Yes, yes. And I think what you're saying is so profound and so important, because when you are in the back seat, you can't address it. You can't face the
Right.
challenge. It's too much. It's everything. It's
Right.
overwhelming.
Right.
But when you do that, when you push that pain and those wounds to the back seat and say, no, I'm driving, all of a sudden you can see. You can see through the windshield now. You can see the possibilities. You can see the truth that you're still there. You can see the goodness in yourself and in your future. Wow,
Exactly.
this is so important, Audrey. Thank you so much for your insights and your willingness to learn through your pain. I'm so grateful.
I do wholeheartedly believe that when you have gone through things like trauma and pain and suffering, you have a different outlook on human beings because you understand the complexities,
Yes.
right? And these are the things that, young Audrey wishes that somebody just came up and told her. And that's the whole reason why behind writing the book, is because I hope that young Audrey out there just needs somebody to say, I see you, I see what you're going through, and you can still live.
Yes. 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 I love that. There's so much truth and wisdom. And maybe somebody could have told you this, but I think the magic of it is that you learned it, that you, in your extremities,
Yes.
persevered, and now you own it.
Right.
Somebody can tell us something important and meaningful and maybe even impactful, but when we discover it for ourselves and we had to earn it, we now own
Right.
it. And now you're a gem and a spokesman for this cause of keeping ownership of who we are despite our challenges.
Right. Right.
Oh my goodness, I adore you. I think you're amazing.
So
See why this is why I said at the beginning that you're my hero, because you choose to believe. You choose to take one step in front of another. You choose to do one more hard thing. You choose to fight back the million reasons why it would be easy to just go climb in bed and cover your head with the blankets. You choose to get up and to move forward. And your current occupation is all about serving others. It's all about lifting them from their traumas and being a light to them and showing them that it is possible. You can live a life that is not controlled by your trauma, but
right.
that you become more because of your trauma.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's even with my occupation. I mean, that's one of the biggest messages that I have is I think once you see how beautiful that life can be, you really don't have a choice to go back into bed. You
Yeah.
really don't have a choice to give up because it's almost, I feel as if this pain makes me even stronger because I know in my heart that I am doing things even with the pain.
Yeah.
And that's what's important to remember when you have any level of trauma or anything. Every win is so much bigger because you did it with those things again in the back seat.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And have you had people ask you, I don't know how you did it. I don't know how you chose to move forward and deal with that. And it sounds like you're saying what I told people that asked me that. It's like
Right.
there's not really a choice.
Yeah,
The option was not really an option for me.
right. That's kind of what drew me to be a little more public about everything that I've dealt with,
Yeah.
because I have had people that have asked me, how do you do it? It's always a tricky question, right? That we get asked because it's the second that you realize that both can happen at the same time, you can be in pain, you can experience trauma, and you can live. It's almost like there's no way of going back, right? Other things could happen, but you've already figured this out. And I've said in my book many times that I'm not going to lie and say the pain doesn't try to take hold of the wheel again
Oh,
or just
definitely.
jump in the front seat,
Yeah.
because people sometimes might believe that as well, that
Mm,
suddenly we're healed,
yeah.
right? And nothing, suddenly we're healed and we can do everything, right?
Yeah.
It can very well, and it probably will, but it's the ability to let it do its thing and then take control again. And that's what's important.
Yes. Yes. Choosing again and again to take back the wheel. I love that. So, Audrey, how do you feel about your life now?
What a great question. I I have never been more proud of myself, but I'm not somebody to say that things always happen for a reason, right? Younger me wouldn't have been a fan of that statement. So I tried to avoid that. I think it's less everything happens for a reason and more so the trauma and the pain that I've endured, it has taught me things that people twice or triple my age could never even imagine.
Yeah.
I have seen the lowest of the lows of life, the trenches of life. And yet at 24, I'm still reaching the highs without realizing there are even more on top of it. Everything that I do in a day, down to getting ready, brushing my teeth, eating, any of the littlest of things are such big wins that there's no way to end the day feeling like I lost.
Wow.
And of course, there are things that could show for what I do in life that people might see on the outside. But the thing that I value most is that I am not going to quit, and I'm going to continue speaking out about this because people need to hear it and people need to understand. And I have this type of understanding of how to talk to people who might not have something, chronic pain of some sort, of an explanation. I can typically give that, but it's more so just the general knowledge that I have of humans, which is why with my job, I have so much passion, because if you have trauma of any type, I know you at least need to hear that you're valid.
Yeah.
And once people hear that enough, they will begin to believe it.
I think that what you said was key, that one of the things that you have really gleaned from this experience, these traumas, is compassion for people.
Yes.
And if we can invite people who are listening to choose compassion even before they go through the trauma. Choose compassion for someone you see who is struggling physically. Choose compassion for someone who you know just went through something hard. Choose
Right.
compassion for someone who is grumpy in the drive-through, right?
Right.
Right? Choose observation instead of judgment. Choose
Right.
compassion instead of irritation. And that will ease a lot of the angst that we can feel when we do have our own traumas, because it creates a little bit safer world if we think somebody is going to be compassionate for me instead of irritated at me because I'm a burden,
Right.
and I can breathe a little bit more easily. I can
Right.
take another step forward.
And choose compassion in yourself as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I think we as humans are just trying to get to the next day, the next job, the next, I don't know, home, family, whatever you want to picture. And yet we are so hard on ourselves
Yeah.
that a lot of the time we won't even acknowledge trauma or pain or suffering, because the second we acknowledge it, we are scared of what's there.
Yeah.
And if you show yourself compassion and trust and validation in yourself that what you went through was hard and you can still live.
Yes. I love that. That's so perfect. If people are listening right now, it's like I don't know how to give myself permission, then Audrey and I are giving you permission right now.
Yes, exactly. You now have permission from this moment forward, no matter where you're listening, show yourself a little compassion.
Yes. Validate yourself. Even if nobody else can do that right now. They're on their journey and you're on yours. And
Right.
it's a nice romantic idea to think about somebody swooping in and saving the day and saving us.
Right.
But when it comes down to it, we're our own heroes. We
Right.
are responsible for lifting ourselves up, because the wonderful people around us might not be able to lift us up. And so,
Exactly.
as we learn how to lift ourselves up and in the process inspire others and help them lift themselves up, we start a chain reaction, and we have self compassion, and we have self validation, and we have self love, for goodness sakes, right?
Right.
We just
Right.
blow the roof off of impossibilities and choose the future and choose joy and
Right.
choose possibilities in relationships, in careers, in our health, and
Right.
never let any of these things just smack down a lid on them, because
Right.
as you are illustrating so beautifully, we can choose. We can choose to drive. We can choose to create our lives no matter what our obstacles are.
Right. No, and I think that's beautifully said. When when you begin showing yourself the compassion, because there could be traumas or pain that people don't even know you're experiencing. So when
Right.
you begin to validate yourself, what you'll kind of see is exactly what you were talking about, that chain reaction of emotions. And then eventually what you will see is that you will be able to live with yourself because you validate yourself.
Yeah.
You won't have to think about fighting yourself or anything like that. And that's why I think it's so important to know that you can do both. You can live with both, and you could live beautifully with both.
Thank you. Thank you, Audrey. This has been such an inspiring and powerful conversation. I'm so grateful for you. A couple last questions. What
First,
do you want someone to know who has been through significant trauma?
life is possible after the trauma. There is an after the trauma. I'm not promising that it's not going to be there. I'm not promising that you won't have to face it sometimes, but living alongside it, it'll eventually start getting smaller and smaller. You won't realize it'll come up as much. And whatever you have gone through, however much you have gone through, I am incredibly sorry. And I validate you. Even if you're just not quite there yet, I validate you.
I love that. And the other question, what does the world need to know about trauma survivors?
We are not these abnormal people. We are just like everybody else. We just might have an extra load in the back, right? But we are just like everybody else. We have passions, we have desires, we have goals, and we are not in any way our trauma. That is simply a piece of us.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much, Audrey.
No, thank you for having me.
All right, everybody. Audrey Marie, she has a book coming out in January 2024, right?
Yes, yes.
Chronically Unstoppable, How My Life Went from Fight or Flight to Free. And that's what this is about, right? True freedom.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being with me. Remember to share this episode with 3 people who you feel could use it today. Don't want to wait for next week for new insights and wisdom? Go to www.tiffanygarvin.com/emotional healing for a free guide to help you begin healing the emotional wounds that are holding you back. Again, the link is tiffanygarvin.com/emotional healing. It will be in the show notes as well. I believe in you. See you next week.